Welcome everybody to our Chocolatey Software Product Spotlight live stream for August. Yes, it's actually August already. Today we're going to look at a recent release of Chocolatey CLI. Every month we run two live streams on the first Thursday and the third Thursday. And this live stream is where we spotlight chocolatey products, recent releases, and important features. Our other live stream on the third Thursday of each month is the Chocolatey Community Coffee Break, where we talk to members of the chocolatey community, discuss how you can get involved, and recent changes to the community as a whole. The next chocolatey community live stream is the 17th of August, 2 weeks from today. You can watch out for announcements of all of our chocolatey content by joining us on Discord, subscribing to us on YouTube, or following us on Twitter, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch. We're on everything. You can find those links at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org. My name is Paul Broadwith, and I'm the Technical Engineering Manager here at Chocolatey Software. I lead the engineering team that's responsible for the products that we'll be talking about today. My co-host today is usual. It's Gary Yoonpark, and he'll be taking us through the technical aspects today, including the demos and what we're going to look at. So, Gary, do you want to introduce yourself?
I can certainly do that, yes. So my name is Gary Yoonpark, as Paul said. I'm the Principal Software Engineer here at Chocolatey Software. I've been working on Chocolatey Software, or Chocolatey, for a long time now, and I'm happy to bring you information about our latest release. One thing I think we should point out before we go too much further, Paul, is I think people might not recognise where we're
I was going to come
being
to that,
brought
Gary. You steal my
from.
thunder, man.
So might want to mention that and what we're doing and why.
Yeah, I was going to say, before we kind of start and get into everything today, we're trying something a little bit different. So we normally, without getting into all the details at the back end, we normally do something with Zoom, because you've probably seen the Zoom logo down in the bottom right-hand corner of our previous live streams. So today we're doing something a little bit different. We've got our names on here as well. We're going to do some fancy stuff where you can see us. We've got the code up there. We're going to do all these cool and awesome things. However, this is the first time we've done this. We've done a little bit of prep. It's worked fine, but as with all things technical in the wonderful world of computers, it's great when it works. So fingers crossed it continues to work. Bear with us if there's any technical issues today, but we're going to dive into playing around a little bit with some movement of pictures, and you'll see it all, and it's awesome, it's fantastic, and it'll be the greatest thing you've ever seen. So I think, does that cover it, Gary? Or is there?
I think it does. No, I think it does.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So just before we start, so the 2.0.0 release of chocolatey products that we made at the tail end of May, it was a huge change to the internals of the chocolate products. If you've heard anything from me about the 2.0.0 release of chocolate, I've said all of this and you've heard it before. But if you've not been on one of our streams before, it's just to make you aware that the changes we've made to chocolate, the version 2 of chocolate, were huge. And it's expected with any major change, no matter how much testing we do, bugs do surface. And we're working on those now. As part of that 2 release, we're continuing to add some additional features there just to overcome some issues that were there. We'll fix some bugs, and we're going to look at today the 2.2.0 version of Chocolatey CLI that was recently released, which fixes a few bugs and introduces a few features to help with what's going on. And as I said, Gary's going to take us through that today.
I can certainly try. So you happy for me to get started?
Yeah. Let's do some wonderful wizardry with the pictures, Gary.
Let's do that. So let's...
Woo!
Whoa, look at that. Right.
Amazing.
So we should be doing essentially a picture-in-picture now. I'm sharing my screen where I'm currently showing Google Chrome with our release notes open. And then we'll jump into some demonstrations to go through what was included in this release. So as Paul kind of mentioned, the 2.0.0 release was a major release, and even within the release notes for 2.2.0, we do have a warning there where we do recommend you have a read through the upgrade guide, make sure that you're happy with all of the breaking changes that we did release, as well as suggestions for what you need to do in order to get up and running as quickly as possible. But in terms of the 2.2.0 release, this was predominantly a bug fix release. There were a couple of bug fixes in there that came up as part of the previous 2 releases, so the 2.0.0 and the 2.1.0 some bugs were identified, and we have worked hard to get those fixed. But we also had some opportunity to pull in some improvements as well as some documentation. So let's just go through them sort of in order. The first bug fix was around upgrading from Chocolatey CLI 2.0 to 2.1. Took a long time to complete if certain other packages were installed. So there's lots of words in there, but to break that down, what that came down to is the way that we do package dependency resolution in the new 2.x version of Chocolatey. We want to make sure that we're not going to break anything. So we look to see what other packages are installed. We look to see what dependencies the package that you're attempting to install or upgrade takes. And we go through all of those dependencies and all those interactions and try to establish whether the operation that you're trying to do is allowed and can complete successfully. But in doing that, we were a little bit overzealous, especially when the package that you're trying to install or upgrade takes a dependency on something else. Because what ended up happening was that we would do a request for every single package version of the dependency and every single version of that dependency as well. So it ended up with quite a lot of outgoing queries. So why does that take a long time? Well, if you, for instance, have got something like the Chromium package installed currently, Chromium has a gazillion different package versions, right? That's the actual number. So when you try and install, and Chromium, the Chromium package, if I recall correctly, takes a dependency on Chocolatey for reasons. So when you try and do something like Choco upgrade Chocolatey, it then goes to find that the Chromium package is installed, and Chromium has a dependency on Chocolatey. So there's lots and lots and lots of outgoing queries. And the end result of that is that at the command line, it looks as though Chocolatey is stalled. But behind the scenes, you'll see lots of these outgoing queries that says, what are the dependencies, what are the dependency package versions, etc., etc., etc. It collects all of this information, and eventually it decides, oh, sure, I'll let you install. But it takes a while to proceed and to get to that point. So we fixed that in 2.2.0, but in order to get to 2.2.0, you will still have that initial delay because you're still on the older version of Chocolatey. And that older version of Chocolatey still is doing all those queries. So if you are in that situation where you have other certain packages installed with that dependency setup, it will take a while to still do that installation and that upgrade. So leave it, and eventually it will work. We've heard people say it can take upwards of 5 minutes to complete, which is really unfortunate. Apologies, obviously, but it was as a result of us trying to ensure that the current operation that you're attempting to do will and can succeed successfully. So that's that one. Long story short, after you get to 2.2.0, it should no longer take a long time for those package upgrades or those package operations to complete. Okay. Any questions on that one, Paul? Because that one was quite a few people in the community came back to us to say that was an issue, and then we dug in.
Yeah, it's and as you said, sometimes it only takes a couple of minutes. Sometimes it's taken a little bit more than that. It's unfortunate, and it's just the Chromium package that it seems to affect as well. It's very strange, but
it's just the combination of the dependency and the sheer number of package versions in play that make it compounded in terms of the time it takes. Okay, so the next one, Chocolatey CLI v 2.0, prompts for credentials when authenticating to a source that is using Windows authentication. So this one was an interesting one, mainly because I don't think I've ever actually seen someone use Windows authentication when using a package repository. Typically, when you are doing package repositories, you're using API keys or normal username and password, or potentially a certificate and a certificate password. But a community member came along and told us that as a result of going from 1.x to 2.x, they were no longer able to authenticate to it was actually a ProGet server that was configured to use Windows authentication because it was hosted under IIS. And the way that they'd set it up is that Chocolatey would essentially provide the credentials for the currently logged in user, and with Windows authentication, they would be given access to that repository server. And in 2.x, that didn't work anymore. So I believe I'm right in saying it was Corey in the team set about figuring out what was going on there, because Corey did a lot of work in the run up to the 2.0 release with regard to proxy configurations, knowing how all of that sort of stuff worked. So it was kind of a natural segue for Corey to dig in and figure out what was going on there. And happy to say that that has now been fixed. So what we'll see now is that you can have a ProGet server, a ProGet repository, or assuming the other repository servers also provide that functionality, you can have that hosted under something like IIS, and you can. Sorry, I'm going to have to do this comment from Corey in the chat there, saying that proxies and authentication are amazing, and I'm assuming that is the emoticon that is being shown there. With that setup in place, hosting the repository server under IIS, Chocolatey will now present the currently logged in user to that server, and then you can then do your normal sort of RBAC permissions within the repository server from there. So that one was, like I say, that was a surprise to me. I've never seen someone use Windows authentication in that way for a feed or a source for Chocolatey. So it's good to know that that functionality is there, and it's better to know now that it is something that we have fixed, and it will continue to work as well. The next one, I probably will dig in and show some of this as a demonstration. Chocolatey CLI is unable to save HTTP cache files when running as a non-admin user, and the cache location is set to point at the Chocolatey program data folder. So again, quite a lot of words there, but we're trying to be specific about what we're talking about in these release notes. So if I run something like Choco Outdated here, so this is me running 2.2.0. I'm running Choco Outdated. So what happens when you run Choco Outdated? Behind the scenes, Chocolatey is saying, what packages do I have installed? It'll then reach out to the sources that I have configured, and it will find out what the latest version of each of that packages is, and then it'll tell me whether what I've got installed locally matches, i.e. it's not outdated, or what the available package version is from one of those sources. Before 2.x, all of those queries would have happened, all of those outgoing queries would have happened every time I run the Choco Outdated command. So first time you run it, it would say, let's say you've got 10 packages installed, it would make 10 queries to find out what the latest version of each of those packages are. And in 1.x, every time you run Choco Outdated, it would do that same 10 queries again, every single time. But now with 2.x of Chocolatey, those outgoing HTTP queries are actually cached now on disk. So you might notice that the second time I ran Choco Outdated there, it was quicker because it didn't have to do all the outgoing HTTP queries. It was using the result from the cached version that's on disk now. The reason that we want to do that is for optimizing the experience within the CLI, because within a 30-minute period, which is the default timeout for the cache, things aren't going to change that much. And what we introduced was you can also have I forget the actual option now, but there's ignore HTTP cache, I think. So if you wanted to force all the outgoing queries rather than using the cache versions, you can absolutely do that. You have the power to do that. But when you run that as an administrator, as I am here, if we go up to the C program data folder, we'll see that there is a new Chocolatey HTTP cache folder. So that's where the results of all of those queries are stored. Now, if you're running in a non-administrator context, it will put those cache queries in your own user folder, your own user temp folder. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, the way that Chocolatey CLI works is that we have the concept of a configuration item. So if I do choco config get cache location, that is a directory path or a folder, a path to a folder where you want cached items to be stored. So that could include MSIs, EXEs, nupkegs, anything that Chocolatey needs to cache, which is typically the environment temp location. You can control exactly where that is. The reasons that you would want to do that might be, for example, you want more direct control over knowing that this is where Chocolatey is going to put all of its things. So if you wanted to clean those up as part of your normal system maintenance, you can do that with much more granularity because you know exactly that that's all of the things that Chocolatey is going to be caching. So again, why is all of that important? Well, some people have a specific configuration where they change the cache location to be another folder. Now, it's when you change to be another folder that we can get into a sticky situation, because Chocolatey by default, or Chocolatey prefers to be run in an admin context, because normally when you're installing an application, you need admin permissions in order to perform that operation. But Chocolatey can also run in a non-administrator context, mainly more from our business customers, but certainly still as a normal user, an everyday user, you can run in a non-elevated situation, but you might want to put the cache location into another location that does have admin rights, and that's where we start to get a conflict. So what we found was that depending on the setup, you could have you could have a situation where it was trying to save the HTTP cache files into a folder location that was requiring administration permissions whilst running in a non-elevated context. So what we've done is we've changed the way that the caching mechanism works, and we've expanded that to essentially all operations that Chocolatey now does, where if you're running in a non-elevated situation, we will ensure that the lock files and the cache files are put into a location that you as that non-administrator user has access to. And if you are running with it with elevated permissions, we will store it where we would ultimately have stored it before. So it was one of those. It's a fairly gnarly bug that we had to dig in a little bit to figure out what was going on, but happy to say that we did figure out what the issue there was. Okay, so that was the last of the 3 bugs that was included in the 2.2.0 release of Chocolatey CLI. So let's start looking at the improvements. One of these improvements, I think, came from Paul himself. I think I'm right in saying the first one there. So the first one there was to remove a warning message about smarter than the average bear. So if you haven't seen this before, I'm probably not in a situation where I can illustrate this, but if you were to try and do Choco Upgrade Winterstat, if you were in a situation where you had a newer version of a package installed locally than what was available on your feeds or the sources you had configured, Chocolatey would provide a warning that said, you must be smarter than the average bear because you've got a package installed locally that is greater than the package versions for all the sources that you have available. Why would you be in that situation? You could be in that situation because you're maybe testing out a new package version, or you installed a package version from a source that had a newer version, and then you removed that source. And then when you went to upgrade that package, that was now confused in the sense that you had a newer package version installed locally than was available on all of your package sources. So the actual complete warning was, you have package version X installed, the highest package version available is less than X, you must be smarter than the average bear. So that message, that warning message, has been there for a long time, probably since Chocolatey first got created. but we had some people in the community say that it didn't make sense to have that anymore. So we took this opportunity to remove that warning message, or that portion of the warning message, and that will no longer be shown in the output when you attempt to do an upgrade of a package.
The actual person who raised the issue for this, and why I kind of did the pull request to remove it, was they were confused about it. They were concerned about it. They actually thought they'd been hacked.
Yes.
So they ran virus scans, various other things. So we thought that this isn't the first time somebody's mentioned it. People call it an Easter egg. It's not really an Easter egg, but so yeah, that's why we took the opportunity to actually just remove it. It seemed to be causing confusion. It's a little bit of humor. I think it was fine, but it's been causing confusion, and that's the reason we thought we'd remove it.
Yep.
We don't want to make people to run virus scans when they see this because they think they've been hacked. So yeah, it doesn't add anything. It doesn't remove anything from the experience. It's just some text.
Yep. So the next improvement here is improve overall execution time when performing the Choco upgrade all command. So let's dig into it. This was a issue that was raised by a community member, the Cake is a Lie, and happy to say that the Cake is a Lie also provided a PR to fix this problem. So essentially what this came down to is the Cake is a Lie. I think it's fair to say that he uses hundreds of chocolatey packages. And when he ran Choco Upgrade All after upgrading to 2.x of Chocolatey, he found that operation was taking a significantly longer time than it had done under 1.x of Chocolatey. So when he dug into it, what he found was that every time, or let's use a number. So let's say he had 200 packages. So the way that Choco Upgrade All works, it says for each of those 200 packages, it will go through and say, is there a new version available? If there is, I'll go and upgrade it. But in between each of those operations to perform the upgrade operation, if it was required, it would also say, give me the list of the currently installed packages. Now, if you have just upgraded a package, that might have upgraded dependencies as well. So listing out the currently installed package versions when you've just performed an upgrade operation makes sense because you need that information to continue on with the overall upgrade operation. But if you haven't actually performed the operation for that first package or for the second package or for the third package, listing out all of the available package versions hasn't changed since the last time that the loop had proceeded. So when you scale that out over 200, 300 packages, the overall upgrade result takes much longer than we would want it to. So the Cakes of Lie looked at that and said, well, that's silly, and it was. But it hadn't really come up in our testing because during our testing, although we try to be as close to a production environment as possible, we didn't have 300 packages installed on our machine when we ran our Choco Upgrade All tests. That's a lesson learned. But so what he's done now is he's made a modification so that during the Upgrade All operation, it will only relist the currently installed packages when an operation has been done. So the net result of that is if for those 200 packages, you only have one that needed an upgrade, then it'll just flip through all of the packages, not relisting all the installed packages again, and it'll get to that one package that needs to be upgraded, and it's significantly quicker overall to perform that operation now than it was before. So that was a significant performance improvement. So yeah, thanks to the Cake is a Lie for putting that together, and happy to get that included in this 2.2.0 release as well. The next improvement was around expand the logging around the exception that is thrown when Chocolatey CLI is unable to communicate with a source. What this one is about is that let's start somewhere else. So by default, Chocolatey CLI only has one source. That's the Chocolatey Community Repository. Now, if there's a problem communicating with that source, then it's kind of crystal clear in terms of which source it is because you've only got one source. But if you expand the sources that have multiple sources at once, then there are times when you maybe can't communicate with a source for reasons. It might not be available. There might be some TLS issue. There might be some proxy issue, etc., etc., etc. There's lots of things that could mean that a source isn't able to communicate with one particular source. But the end result of how that was displayed in the CLI was it would essentially say a generic message that said unable to connect to source, and that was it. So although there was potentially some additional information displayed or that could be displayed, we weren't capturing that to show to the end user. So what we've done is we've expanded the logging in that scenario when there is a problem communicating with a source. But what we haven't done is we haven't put that to the output. And by the output, I mean the Chocolatey CLI output at the terminal, because that's potentially lots of information depending on the exact problem that happens. But what we have done is we've captured all of that into the chocolatey.log file, and I'm fairly sure I'm right in saying that there is a new entry in the output that says, see the log for more information about this error message. And then at that point, you can go into the log file, see all the information about the operation that just happened, and hopefully that will help guide you towards the error, or to the solution, I should say. If it doesn't, at least then you have all of the information in the log file that could be useful to us in terms of figuring out what's going on. So if you're raising an issue on GitHub, or you're talking to us on Discord, or you're raising a support ticket because you're a licensed customer, there's more information in that log file that will help us figure out what's going on. So that's all that one was. The next improvement, ensure that only administrators are able to modify files that are stored within the Chocolatey HTTP cache folder. So we spoke about this Chocolatey HTTP cache folder in one of the bug fixes earlier. And I said that that was available at the C program data Chocolatey HTTP cache location. So in the previous version, in the 2.1.0 version, when we created that Chocolatey HTTP cache folder, we only locked it down as far as the default permissions for a folder within the program data folder. So it was locked down in the sense that only administrators can really alter it and do things with it, but it wasn't completely locked down. So other things, other people could still add files into that folder, for example. So in this release, what we've done the same thing that we've done with the actual Chocolatey folder itself. So during the installation of Chocolatey, we locked down that Chocolatey folder quite significantly, so it can only be, it can't be manipulated as easily as a normal folder within the C program data folder. So we applied the same permission set now to the Chocolatey HTTP cache folder as well. So that it wasn't it was more done for complete consistency in terms of the permission sets that we put onto our folders. So I'm just seeing something whizzing by the screen there. I see Paul's playing with the new functionality that we've got here. So the Chocolatey HTTP cache folder is now locked down with the same permission set as the Chocolatey folder itself. So what you will see in the output is that we try to assert those permissions every time it uses that folder. So if you had 2.0 installed or 2.1 installed and it had already created that folder, it won't assert the permissions onto the folder if it already exists. So what you'll see in the output is a validation warning saying that the Chocolatey HTTP cache folder doesn't have the. In fact, I think I can show you this. So if I come over the screen and I do, I'm going to delete that folder, the one that Chocolatey itself created, and I'm going to create the folder just directly in here with normal permissions. And I'm going to make sure that I spell Chocolatey right, because otherwise that's not going to help. So I'm going to create a folder called Chocolatey HTTP cache. And if I run choco outdated, I have it here somewhere. So what we'll see in the output is that it will do the work, it'll do all the queries, it'll put the queries into that folder, but there is a validation warning here that says the system cache directory is not locked down to administrators. Remove the directory to have the CLI recreate it with the proper permissions. So what you would do there is you would come along, you would delete that folder, and then you would rerun the chocolatey command. It will recreate that folder, assert the right permissions that we want to be on that folder, and then at that point, everyone's happy. So then, if you rerun that again, obviously, then you won't see that validation warning, and then it'll continue as it did previously. So if you see that validation warning, that's what it's about. Simply delete that chocolate HTTP cache folder and rerun, and everything should be back to normal. Okay. There's a couple there from a documentation perspective that I want to call out because one of them came from another community contributor or community maintainer, I should say. So the first one was apply scripting best practices to output, which is shown from some Chocolatey CLI validations. So what this is about is that if we go to, for example, Chocolatey command here, let's just use choco install as an example. Then if we scroll down here to scripting best practices, I know it's here somewhere. Options and switches. Where's the scripting best practices? Oh, it's not on this. What page is the scripting best practices on? I thought it was here. Let me. There it is.
There you go.
So we've got an entire section on our website that says if you're scripting, this is the recommendations in terms of using the fully called out source option rather than -s, making sure you're using the right quotes around certain options, etc., making sure that you're using an equals when you're separating. So we've got a whole section of our website that's dedicated to how you do things using scripting best practices. And what I happened to notice as we were going through the last release is that some of the output, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but some of the output that we were showing from one of our own Chocolatey validations wasn't using scripting best practices. So I thought, well, that's just wrong. So I went and fixed it, right? We need to dog food our own things, and we need to hold ourselves to the same level that we hold other people to as well. So that's part of the drive that we've had in recent times in terms of how we maintain our own code bases, how the level of testing's increased for Chocolatey, etc., etc., etc. So this is one more example where we are attempting to improve and to hold ourselves accountable to the same level as that. So if you happen to see any other areas where we're not doing that, definitely let us know, because it is one of the things that we are looking to improve on as we go forward in this Chocolatey experiment that we're currently doing. That's a callback to the Chocolatey Kickstarter for anyone that was around in the Chocolatey Kickstarter. So that's what that one was. It was a small change, but it's also an important one. And the final one was improve the error message that is shown when the default push source configuration value hasn't been set and no explicit source has been provided. So first of all, what is the default push source for those that don't know? So within it was a breaking change, so it was in the 2.0 release. So in the Chocolatey 2.0 release, no, let's start somewhere different. So if I were to attempt to do Choco push, I'm not going to do this because I don't actually want to push this package, but it's the only nupkeg that I could find earlier when I was looking for it. So let's imagine that I wanted to push the Google Chrome package, right? I don't want to push the Google Chrome package because I'm not a maintainer of the Google Chrome package. But imagine I were. In the 1.x version of Chocolatey, if I were to just run Choco push and then the path to the nupkeg, that would work. And by that, I mean it would use the Chocolatey community repository as the default push source. With the 2.x release of Chocolatey, we said we're not going to do that anymore. Why would we not want to do that? We wouldn't want to do that because there are times that you're pushing a package that you're intended to go to your internal package repository rather than to the community repository. So rather than have someone have to then come to the CCR, Chocolatey community repository, and ask for a package to be deleted, we remove that opportunity for inadvertently pushing to the wrong location. So what you have to do now is you have to opt in for the Chocolatey community repository to be your default push source, or equally change your default push source to be your internal repository. But what was pointed out to us from a community maintainer is that we weren't providing very useful information about how to set that default push source in the output that happens when you don't provide one. So previously, this message only said up to including the adding of a source. So if I wanted to do this, I could do source equals and then put a source in here. But if I didn't want to have to do that dash dash source each and every time, there is another way of doing it, which is to set the config, which is the default push source. So what we've included in that output now is an example of how to set the default push source whilst providing a value to get you back to the operation of how Chocolatey was working prior to the 1.x, or within 1.x prior to the 2.x release. So again, it's a reasonably small change. All that change is a change to the output text that we're emitting when that error happens, but it's an error that guides the end user to how to get the functionality that they're looking for. So it's a small but significant change, and again, that came as a direct result of feedback from a community maintainer who suggested that we should provide that functionality or provide that information in the output. So thanks to them. And I think, Paul, that is all we had to talk about for the 2.2.0 release of Chocolatey CLI.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. Was there anything in particular or any one thing that stood out for you more than others on this this release?
So for me, the interesting one was there was lots of behind the scenes debugging and looking into things in this release, but I think it's fair to say that the issue with the HTTP cache files for when the cache location had been altered to another location, that proved to be an interesting one. There's quite a few conversations internally about what the best approach is, how did we get ourselves into this situation, what's the best way path forward, etc. So that one was an interesting one from that perspective. But what I've liked to see in this one again is support and help from the community coming forward. So there was the Choco Upgrade All that was taking a long time to complete. That was one that the issue was raised by a community member. It was provided, the solution was provided by a community member. So that one was great to see. This one, this one was the bane of my life for a short period there. I got given the task of figuring out why that one was taking a long time. And to use one of our colleagues' terms within the team, this one was fun. And by fun, we don't mean fun. So that was an interesting one. But you kind of said it at the start. I mean, going into the 2.0.0 release, we kind of knew that it was going to be, no matter how much testing we have put into play, and I've said this before on these streams, we have got significantly more testing in play now, both in terms of unit tests, in terms of integration tests, in terms of end-to-end tests, in terms of manual tests that we do before each and every release that we've got happening. So we've got much more testing than we've ever had before, but there's always going to be gaps, and there's always going to be things that we have to add more tests for. As soon as the production release hits a live environment, there's always going to be things. I mean, I don't think I was the only one on the team that was surprised that Windows authentication was a thing for repository servers. So that's something that we've now added into our test suite. Unfortunately, it's not an automated test suite at the minute because there's lots of upfront infrastructure work that needs to be put in play to put us into a position where we can test that. But that one was an interesting one. Corey is saying, for some context around the HTTP cache, I just ran Choco Updated on my system with 100 packages, and it took 1 minute 26 seconds. Running it again, it took 16 seconds. So that's the benefit, the overall benefit that you can get from the new caching that's in 2.x. There's significant improvements in terms of the operational speed of some commands. Now, we'll say this: there are still opportunities for improvements in some of these things. We've got a reliably vocal community member who is pushing us to improve certain commands, and I love him for it. It's just that there's priorities that need to be taken, and that specific one isn't there yet, but we will get there. So if you're listening, you know who you are. We will get to those sort of things in time. But yeah, so this release is kind of it's it's one of those releases that it was necessary to do it. There was enough issues in the two. There's enough remaining issues in the 2.1 release that we had to do another 2.2 release, and it's probably not out with the realm of possibility that there might be yet another release to capture some last remaining dangling issues that we have. But touch wood, cross fingers, the majority of the known issues have now at a point where we've put them to bed. So we're into this kind of settled in period now with the 2.x release, that things are functional, things are operating the way that we expect them to. So again, fingers crossed, touch wood, we'll be in a position to maybe jump onto other products within the Chocolatey family and looking at getting some other releases out of those as well. So it's been a long path, Paul. I don't know I can't remember when we started this project, but it's been an interesting road, let's say. I know that you've thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. So
Living the dream, Gary. Living the dream.
So yeah,
We
that's where I
started
am
this
with
at the tail end of October last year. So we've been working on that now for quite a long time. I'm not going to count it all. But yeah, we're seeing the end in sight. Gary's now playing around with the thing I said at the beginning.
I'm trying to keep so we're not maximized. Where's the there we go.
There we
Better
go.
now.
I don't know
Better
what
now.
you did
Sorry.
there, but that's awesome.
Better now.
Yeah, so Gary was playing around with the thing that I mentioned at the beginning where we changed everything. But yeah, it's been a long road. We've seen the light at the end of the tunnel, I think, a little bit. This has been a huge learning experience for everybody in the team. And also we can take those learnings into the next projects and the next major release of Chocolatey CLI as well. And as Gary said, we're looking to working on other products that we have, and we'll be talking about those hopefully in future product spotlight live streams. And our next one for that is just looking here, it's the 7th of September. So we'll be talking about hopefully some other things then. It does seem like we're focused on Chocolatey CLI a lot. And it is our main product. It is where everything kind of comes out of, where it sits at the top of the hierarchy of all of our products. But it's nice to work on other things. If anybody's a developer watching us today, you'll know that it's nice to work on other things sometimes, not just the same thing over and over. And it does feel a little bit like that's what we've been doing. But yeah, so it's been a good release. As Gary said, there's going to be another release soon, where we're hopefully going to tie up some of those loose ends, and that should be us for a little bit of time as we kind of go off on to other things. Okay, so we're a little bit early this time, which is good because we tend to overrun. So it's good to underrun sometimes. Gary, have you got anything you want to add just before we finish?
I don't think so. I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover. The only thing to kind of mention again, I know if you are still seeing issues, definitely feel free to reach out either on our Discord server or raise a discussion on our GitHub repository. And then if we need to, we can create an issue from there. There was, I think I said this to you the other day, Paul, there was a kind of an immediate flurry of people having the same issue when we released 2.x. And that flurry of activity does seem to have died down a little bit. So either we fixed those issues to the point that people are able to progress, or we just haven't heard about them yet. So if you are still having issues, definitely reach out on one of our social media platforms or through Discord, GitHub discussions, etc. Because we definitely want to fix these issues, because me and the team have been invested in this for a fairly extended period now, and we would love to leave it at a point where we can be happy that it's working the way that folks want it to, so that we can work on some of those other products as well, and get some releases out for them too. So yeah, definitely feel free to reach out. This was an interesting release because there did seem to be quite a bit of contribution from the community and from both maintainers and community members. So it was great from that perspective as well, because it's always nice to be able to deal directly with people and to get their issues that they raised fixed and sent out the door. So yeah, absolutely, that's our. You're loving these flyouts, aren't you? They're great.
The,
I
these
I,
are
I, I quite like this platform. I'll be honest. I think this has got some legs in terms of being able to use it. So
yeah.
this was our
I think
first foray into it.
you were talking about GitHub, so I thought I would put that up. And it's important as well because the vast majority of our products and projects are on GitHub itself. So,
Mhm.
people can come along, see those projects, get involved. We're always interested in people getting involved in the community. So that's the Chocolatey GitHub. I mean, I can add in the community one as well as just Chocolatey-community at the end of that one. I will have a lower third for that at some other point. It's just a dash community on the end of that one, where you can get involved in all of our chocolatey things. So yeah, so if we've got nothing else, Gary, to kind of pick up, we've done the release notes and we've had a chat about it. And hopefully everybody understands where we're coming from in terms of the 2.0.0, how that was a major change. I'm not going to go over that again, and how we've got from there to where we are now. And hopefully a new release soon as well, to kind of tie up all those loose ends. So Gary, thank you again for being my co-host today. And for taking us through those demos. It's really much appreciated. And thanks to everybody today for watching us. Really appreciate it. Please follow us on Twitch. You've seen some of the pop-ups there. Check Twitch and YouTube. All of our links, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can find all of the links if you missed them at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org as well. Our next community coffee break, which is where we talk to members of the community and talk about the community in general, is on the 17th of August at 4 p.m. UTC. And our next product spotlight live stream is on the 7th, also at 4 p.m. UTC. So we hope to see you all then. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.